Yes, I'm just going to give a quick report, an update about the hunger strikers for Palestine. This is something that we've been following quite closely, and some people have been going down and protesting. I think Lucan people have been down. Um, I'm not sure. I'm going to give a very brief report, but give some background. There are now 4 young people on hunger strike for Palestine. They're all on remand, having been refused bail. They've been charged with criminal, not terrorist offences, and the offences are things like conspiracy to cause criminal damage. Despite being remand prisoners, they variously have been denied free association, visits, access to books and hijabs, and refused access to jobs and other freedoms that normally come if you're in prison but not convicted. Um, all these issues expose the government to legal action which has begun, as does a failure to provide adequate medical treatment. The government seems to forget that these people aren't casually trying to commit suicide, but they're actually in state custody trying to make a political protest. Now, they belong to a political protest group, Palestine Action, which has now been prescribed, but it's prescribed on the 2nd of July last year. This was after any actions they're involved in took place and after they were arrested. So there's no question that they committed any terrorist offences because they were actually in prison at the time. And when they took actions, there was no prescription. 3 of the 4 hunger strikers took part in an action at Elbit Systems, an Israeli-owned factory supplying parts for arms near Bristol in August 2003-04. There were 24 people charged with that action. Some of them are currently on trial. The prosecution has put up video from the action, which is being challenged by the defence. It's quite damaging, it appears, to the activists. But the problem is many people are confusing what they see on the media now about that action and the people on hunger strike. The other person is accused of throwing red paint at an aircraft at RAF Bryce Norton in June this year. Their lives of certainly 3 of them, and possibly the 4th as well, are now seriously at risk. Hiba Marassi has been 63 days on a hunger strike. She cannot lie on her side. She's got difficulty formulating sentences. She's been moved to a prison in Yorkshire, and her family, many members of her family, can't visit her because of the distance. Cameron Ahmed has been 54 days on hunger strike. His heart is slowing. He's got hearing loss and loss of weight. And when he calls for assistance at Pentonville, he quite often, there's no answer to his bell. Tuta Hoxha has been 57 days on hunger strike. She can no longer stand. She has heart palpitations and difficulty sleeping. Louis Chambello has been 40 days on hunger strike. His strike is slightly different because he's a type 1 diabetic, so he's only actually refusing food every other day. But they're letting him or forcing him to manage his own insulin, and he is actually not very well because of, even if you only refusing food every other day, if you're a type 1 diabetic, you're in great difficulty. Now, there have been a growing number of local demonstrations. Certainly here in Islington, there's been lots of demonstrations at Pentonville, and there's a group called Prisoners for Palestine who were organising local demonstrations and marches. And there's been publicity on social media, and very latterly there's been some publicity in the mainstream media. And the group Prisoners for Palestine have been putting out daily bulletins. Some MPs have been raising it in the House and doing early day motions and parliamentary questions. Interestingly enough, the governor of HMP Peterborough, where Tuta Hoxha is imprisoned, has been asking David Lammy to meet with her lawyers, and has also been asking for her to be granted bail given her medical situation. There are also 6 UN special rapporteurs who've written to the government stating that the state's duty of care towards hunger strikers is heightened and not diminished when they're in detention. And also said the UK is committing clear breaches of Article 3, the prohibition of cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment. When they've been taken to hospital, and some of them have been taken to hospital for short periods, they've remained in quite degrading restraints, even when they're receiving treatment. They're being denied contact with family and lawyers, and there's clearly a lack of consistent medical oversight when they're in prison. Now, the Article 3 issue is important because at the very same time, our Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary and our Home Secretary are trying to persuade the Council of Europe to actually amend Article 3. They want to lessen the prohibition on inhumane, degrading treatments. In contrast to many people who are on the streets or writing letters, our government has been not only silent but also hostile to the hunger strikers. Keir Starmer was asked by Jeremy Corbyn MP in Parliament before Christmas whether he'd ensure that ministers met with the lawyers for the hunger strikers. He gave a one-word answer, no, and some MPs actually laughed at Jeremy for asking the question. David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, initially said he'd never heard of the hunger strike and has taken no action. Lord Timpson, the Prisons Minister, is refusing to see them and said that if he saw their lawyers, it would encourage other people to go on hunger strike. Now, people may be aware that hunger strike is a very common tactic in Ireland, as elsewhere, a place like India. Now, I was looking up at the hunger strike, which I remember really well. In 81, from March to October, many prisoners in the Maze prison went on hunger strike. They were members of terrorist organisations, but they were striking to be seen as political prisoners as opposed to criminal prisoners. What I'd actually forgotten was in July of that year, Humphrey Atkins, then the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, invited the International Committee of the Red Cross to carry out an investigation into prison conditions in Northern Ireland. On the 17th September, James Browder, who was then the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, held a 3-hour meeting with those on hunger strikes. And on the 6th of October, just after the hunger strike finished, James Browder actually met many of their demands, including that they be able to wear civilian clothing, increase the number of visits, and free association. This is in stark contrast to our present government, who will not even countenance meeting them. Most of the people in the 10 people who died on that hunger strike in Ireland died between 55 and 65 days. As I just said, many of the poor young people are in that critical time, and clearly their organs are failing them. They can't stand, they can't think, they can't speak. And yet there's nothing being responded to. It's really important. I think the Hunger Strikers Committee really wishes for more community support, more people speaking up, more people taking political action. It's difficult to compare it to what happened in Ireland because the context, the political awareness in the community was much higher about the hunger strikes. And people may or may not know that one of the hunger strikers, Bobby Sands, and the first one to die, actually stood as an MP during the hunger strikes and was elected. And 2 others stood in the Irish governmental elections and were elected. The hunger strike was pivotal to Sinn Féin adopting a dual policy of the Armalite and the ballot box, and eventually becoming the largest party both sides of the Irish border. it would be good if some of the political support for the Palestinian prisoners for Palestine actually turned into some political progress on what's happening in Gaza.